I'm Neil Scherer. I'm an attorney, art dealer, and sports enthusiast. A number of years ago, I joined my two passions, sports and art, creating one-of-a-kind displays celebrating individual and team achievements, as well as special moments. You know, it's great to have a single autograph, single program, single ticket, but our feeling is when you join these items together, you tell a story, and in actuality, you show a piece of art. So I'm going to start off our show and our exhibit with our work celebrating the great Mickey Mantle, the hero of my father's generation, and I was fortunate in 1967 to see him hit his 513th home run off of Bill Dillman of the Baltimore Orioles. One of the great feats of Mickey Mantle was hitting 18 home runs in World Series play, which still remains the record. So we have in this one-of-a-kind display are the tickets from every World Series game Mantle hit a home run in. And in addition to that, we have the autograph underneath each ticket of the pitcher the home run's off of. So it's really kind of special. Again, in the World Series play, you're not only going against the best teams, but often the best pitchers. So we got Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson and Sal Maglie and Preacher Rowe, among some of the great baseball pitchers that Mantle connected off of. Also, another thing about Mantle, as we've had the show here, by the way, I do displays that are often at museum shows around the country. They're at high-end clubs like it is now. We've also been at some important venues in New York Cities, including Bloomingdale's, Thomas Moser, Steuben Glass, to do exhibitions. And this is something that maybe down the road you and your company might be interested in. In any event, getting back to Mr. Mantle, one of the things that struck me was how often people would come over and say, you know, I hated the Yankees, but I love Mickey Mantle. And it's not often you hear that. Generally, you hate the team, you hate the whole team. He was very charismatic, perhaps Michael Jordan, perhaps Derek Jeter. But again, he had that ability, and people really love this piece. It's one of our featured items here at this current exhibition. And again, we also wanted to show the imagery is important. So what you see here is a very young, very intense, very handsome Mickey Mantle. You know, it's often pitchers can intimidate the hitter, but I would think if I was looking at this gentleman with that face as a pitcher, I'd be pretty intimidated myself. So again, we'd like to start off with Mickey Mantle. We think it's appropriate, and let's move on. In our last display, we explored Mickey Mantle and his 18 World Series home runs. Of course, he was only one half of the M&M team of Mantle and Maris. And Maris in 1961 broke the unbreakable record of Babe Ruth that had lasted since 1927 with 60 home runs. So let's explore this in this one-of-a-kind display. On the upper left-hand corner, we show Roger Maris stepping on home plate, an original wire photo, after hitting his 60th home run, being greeted by Elson Howard. Imagine knowing that now you're tied with Babe Ruth. That just got to be an unbelievable feeling. The upper right corner is the 61st that breaks the record. And not only do we have his autograph, but I like to show this image because of the muscularity in Mr. Maris's arms. You almost feel if it hits his arm and not the bat, it will still be a home run. Again, that put him in the record books, and many people still believe that is the single season home run record. I'm one of them, actually. Here's the great Babe Ruth, an autograph, and the ticket from 1927, the day Ruth hit his 60th home run. The program for Maris's 60th home run scored by somebody at the game. The program for Maris's 61st home run scored by somebody at the game. And of course, we like the mustard stains, the ketchup stains in our scored programs. We don't want somebody who fills it out 10 years later in perfect penmanship. We want you to bring you into the game. The ticket from his 60th home run, the ticket from his 61st home run. We tell the story of Roger Maris breaking the record. These are all authenticated artifacts as we try to do our best to authenticate every item that we have in our pieces. In addition, if that's not enough, we have the autograph of Tracy Stallard, the pitcher gave up the home run, and Sal Durante, the kid who caught the ball and received something like $5,000 or so for the ball, which paid for his honeymoon and a down payment on his house. And again, here is our one-of-a-kind display celebrating Roger Maris' 61st home run. Let's move on now to the greatest ball player of all time in most people's judgment, Babe Ruth. In the first two displays we showed Mickey Mantle's 18 World Home Runs. Well, the Babe's record of 15 was eclipsed in 1963 by Mantle in World Series game against the Cardinals when he hit a home run off of Barney Schultz for his 16th home run. Ruth had that record at 15. Then we showed you Maris breaking his record in 61 with 61 home runs. Well, the Bambino does have some records that he still holds, and one of them is hitting 3 home runs in 2 World Series games. The first being in 1926 and the second in 1928. In this display, we celebrate that moment. The 26 game is particularly interesting because a young boy named Johnny Sylvester is sick and asked Babe Ruth to hit a home run for him. The Bambino not only hits 1 home run, but hits the 3 home runs. Interestingly enough, Sylvester actually gets healthy, and when Ruth is dying, Mr. Sylvester, at least some accounts have it, visits Mr. Ruth at his hospital bed. Interesting. Well, what do we have here to celebrate that great moment? We have, first of all, the autographs of the pitchers who gave up the home run. Here in 1926, there were Flint Rem and Herman Bell. We also have the autograph of the umpire, Bill Clem, who was actually a Hall of Fame umpire, and again, a rare ticket stub from 1926. In 1928, in the upper right-hand corner, we show the autographs of Wee Willie Trudell and the great Grover Cleveland Alexander, who is a very hard autograph to get in a Hall of Famer, as well as Charles Furman, the umpire. Now, some people say, why do you need an umpire? We probably could have gotten away without the umpire. But, you know, they're important aspects of the game. They make the calls. And in 1928, it's very important because Charles Furman, after Ruth had hit a home run early in the game, in the 7th inning, Ruth comes up, and it's an 0-1 count. The ball is slightly outside, or at least Ruth thinks so, but Furman still calls it a strike. At that moment, there's an argument between Ruth and Furman. And during the argument, the catcher for the Cardinals, Eddie Smith, tosses the ball to the pitcher, Wee Willie Trudell, who throws it right down the middle, strike 3, while Ruth is having his argument with Cy Furman. Well, you know, the National League actually allowed the quick pitch in 1928. The American League did not. It's kind of like the DH rule was for many years in the American League and National League. So you would think, being a National League ballpark, Sportsman Park in St. Louis, that Furman would have allowed the pitch to remain and strike 3 and Ruth is out. He overruled that, and he nullified the pitch. I suspect it was because he was part of the argument and didn't want to be part of the game and be part of the issue. In any event, a couple pitches later, Ruth hits his 2nd home run, and then the next inning hits his 3rd. I don't do this piece. History's different. So that's why we wanted Charles Furman in it. Now, also, you know, people ask me, how do I get these autographs, or how do we get these autographs? Well, to get a Ruth and a Garrick, of course, they're out there. They're quite expensive, but they're out there. But get a Charles Furman, well, who has a Charles Furman? It took almost 3 years to get that, and then when we did get it, the first time anyway, the gentleman who we paid for it called me up and said, Neil, I'm going to return your money. And I asked why. He said, well, I can't find the autograph. Of course, I said, look harder, I need that. But he did return the money, and eventually we found somebody else who had one, and that's how we were able to complete the piece. So you know more about Charles Furman than you probably thought you'd ever learn. Then we have, again, the ticket. Vintage tickets, of course, are very important to me, and they've had grown exponentially in value over the last few years, principally because you don't get hard tickets anymore. You either get the StubHub, which is kind of a lousy ticket, or you get the ticket in the phone. So hopefully hard tickets will come back, but maybe not. Then, of course, we have the scored programs from the game from 28, from 26. I think those are pretty impressive to have that. We're happy to have it and to include that. And of course, we have the autograph of Babe Ruth. Everything, again, is authenticated. And then we have these great articles talking about Ruth, vintage articles talking about his 26 exploits and his 28 exploits. And finally, imagery is important to us. At this point in 1928, Ruth is an aging Ruth. He's not the baby-faced Ruth that he was with the Red Sox and even early in his Yankee career. And so we felt we got the image accordingly. I just want you to know that that image is not a photo. It's actually a painting by an artist named Anna Port that we use, and I think it's just perfect for this piece. And I don't know if anybody's ever going to be able to do this type of piece again. It took over 3 years to do, which in retrospect, it's actually pretty quick, I think. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this piece celebrating Babe Ruth's great accomplishment. The last few pieces that we discussed dealt with records of people over career or multiple games. But sometimes a single game, even a single bat, could define a person's career and lead them to a legacy that will live throughout their history of the game. One such moment occurred in 1978. I'm a freshman at the University of Wisconsin. My roommates are Red Sox fans, and the Yankees, of course, and the Red Sox have another one of their battles, and they finish tied at the end of the year, and they have to play a one-game playoff game in Fenway Park. And the unlikeliest hero of them all for the Yankees is a gentleman named Bucky Dent, who hits a dramatic home run to catapult the Yankees to victory. And of course, in Boston, he's not very well liked. In fact, they often use the term Bucky effing Dent to describe him. And here what we have is a wonderful photo of Dent making impact when he hits a home run. And he talks about that play in about 3 or 4 paragraphs. It's really fun to read. What we also have in this display are the autographs of all the Red Sox who played in that game on 78 cards. And, you know, they had a wonderful team with Carl Yastrzemski, of course, Lynn, Rice, Fisk, great team. The Yankees, on the other hand, on the other side, we have all their autographs of all their players on 78 cards. Sadly, Thurman Munson died in a plane accident later on, so we got his autographs separately. People of today basically know Don Zimmer as the bench coach for the New York Yankees, but he was actually the manager of the Red Sox on that fateful day for Boston Nation. Here he is shown on the program for that day. Bucky Dent signs the hard ticket. Again, hard tickets are something that you just don't get as much these days, if at all. Greg Nettles makes the catch of Yastrzemski to end the game. I know he was an old Yastrzemski, but he was still Yastrzemski, and I was scared to death when he came up at that in the 9th inning. Bucky Dent being greeted by his teammates, the guys I grew up with, Chambliss and Roy White, and they're excited. I think they're also shocked, as the nation was, that Dent hit the home run. And even a piece of the Green Monster signed by Mike Torres, the pitcher, and Bucky Dent, celebrating that moment. So this is really a spectacular piece. I will say one thing. Originally, it was a mistake that we almost decided to take out, but in retrospect, we thought it was important to keep in. If you notice this photo here, it shows this gentleman in the number 20 uniform jumping up and down, and it's on a dark day, on a nighttime scene. That is not from the game. Obviously, Bucky Dent never hit many home runs, so he would have ran as hard as he could to first base, and he would never jump up and down like that. Also, obviously, the game was played in daytime. However, this is the most recreated game. Fans paid to recreate this moment. And in retrospect, because of that and the fact that it still has such importance, even today, many years later, we decided to keep it in there just to give the impact of what this game not only meant to the Yankees, but what it meant to Bucky Dent. Well, we've explored the exploits of the eminent boys Mantle and Maris in previous displays with their home run power. And in 1962, the Post Serial came up with these wonderful cards showcasing the great Maris and Mantle. And we decided to do a piece celebrating those two guys with these big, magnificent cards with the handsome Mantle and Maris. And this is a great display for somebody who wants to remember that 61 season when these two guys went at it and captured the attention of all of America. Well, we've explored some of the great baseball teams of all time. And one particular year that's very important is 1946 season. Why is that important? The boys have been at war for many years. Some of the great ball players like Musial and Williams and Yogi, they lost a number of great years to their career. We always wonder what Williams' records would have been and Musial and some of the others. Maybe even Yogi Berra might have gotten that 12th or 13th championship and taken over Bill Russell for the undisputed #1 champion of all time. So in 1946, with the boys coming back, here's a piece we just completed celebrating the St. Louis Cardinals' 1946 championship. Williams, in that particular year, his first year back from the war, wins the American League MVP, his only MVP. Musial wins the National League MVP. And Williams actually has an incredible all-star game as well in Boston. So what happens, unfortunately for Williams, he's hurt just prior to the World Series, and he has a terrible World Series, only batting .200. I'm sure it's one of his biggest regrets anyway during his career. So what happens is the Cardinals win in 7 games. We have the 7 tickets from that game. The important play was in Game 7 when Enos Country Slaughter scores on first base on a single, or some people say it's a single. They call the Mad Dash. And it sort of surprised the outfielder when he got the ball, seeing him run around third base, continuing. And it's one of the more legendary plays in baseball history. The other important aspect that I'd like to make note on this particular piece is that this is the last year of segregated baseball. Jackie Robinson comes into the league the next year, breaks the color barrier, and baseball's changed forever. Now we come to the NFL and the New York Football Giants of 1938, the NFL champions. What's interesting about football back then, it was a fledgling league. So people are surprised when they see that the New York Giants played the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Brooklyn Dodgers, teams that we usually feel are just baseball oriented, and they are. I mean, those are the great baseball teams. However, football piggybacked off the baseball teams in order to get hopefully bigger gate and make some more money. I found that interesting when I got there. So we have the Pittsburgh Pirates, Brooklyn Dodgers, as well as the Philadelphia Eagles and the Chicago Cardinals as part of the teams the Giants played that year. The other thing that's fascinating is the Cleveland Rams, who this year won the championship as the LA Rams. Where did the term Rams come from? Believe it or not, it came from the Fordham Rams, who were a dominant football team in the 30s and 40s. We don't think of college football in New York these days, but actually NYU, Columbia, and Fordham were some of the powerhouses, or at least teams that played competitive high-end football at that particular time. What I also like to point out is the handsome gentleman in the lower right. That is Wellington Mara, the Duke. Mr. Mara, actually, his father, Tim Mara, bought the Giants in 1925 for $500. They're probably worth $3 or $4 billion now or something like that, so it's a pretty good investment. Wellington probably started as a ball boy, then moved all the way, and then, as what I remember him, is the owner of the Giants. So I found that kind of an interesting part of putting this fantastic display together. We have all the autographs of all the players, the ticket from the championship game and the program, even the autograph of Steve Owen, the coach, legendary coach. The other thing that's kind of important, obviously players today are much bigger than they were back then. I love this thing. Tarzan White played guard at 5'9", University of Alabama. Maybe Altuve could have played guard, I don't know, back then. The other thing that's interesting is when I did this piece, which again took about 3 years to do, the only thing that I could find similar between 1938 and today's players, the only thing I could find similar is if your name is Ox Perry, you have to be a tackle. You have to be. In our recent show here in the New York City Landmark Club, we also like to have some really interesting pieces. And this is actually a painting. No, it's not a photograph. It's a painting of some of the legendary athletes in American history in all different decades. And it's done by one of my favorite artists, Adam Port. And this is his piece called The Iconic Athletes. How many can you name? I would point them out, but I think it's more fun for you to see if you can figure out all of them. There are some tough ones in there, but generally it also tells you about the generational differences. I'm approaching 62, hard to believe, but I am. And these I can get probably 90 to 100%. Most people 15 above can do that. What's interesting, people under 30 obviously have much more difficult time naming these people. And part of it is, I guess, it's just the age factor. Part of it is I always wonder if kids learn history, sports history, or otherwise. So anyway, I just think it's a magnificent painting. You almost feel you could talk to Jesse Owens. I gave you the hard one, by the way. See if you get the rest. As I mentioned early on in an introduction, I've been an art dealer for probably 30 years, dealing with paintings from Bierstadt to Basquiat. And when I can incorporate an art piece, a true art piece, into my show, I always enjoy doing it. And what you see here are two paintings depicting the game, Harvard versus Yale, from probably 1931 or 1932, by a well-known illustrator named Harold von Schmidt, who lived almost 90 years old. I think his dates around 1890 to 1982. Here are two paintings that he did that depict the Harvard versus Yale game, but was also used as featured paintings in a story called Kid Brother by Francis Cockrell in Cosmopolitan magazine in the 1933 issue. Very rarely do you see football paintings, especially college football paintings, of such an important rivalry as the Harvard versus Yale football game. And we have them. They're both pretty major works, measuring somewhere between 24 by 40 and I think 30 by 40. Along with some of the great team champions and individuals and team events, there are also individual events that capture the attention of the American people and the world. One of them, of course, is Michael Phelps and his incredible accomplishments during his career, winning 23 gold medals, I believe. And in the Chinese Olympics, which feature here in this display, he won 8 gold medals, 7 on world records. We have the tickets from every single winning event for Michael Phelps. I also like to point out the image that we selected. I've always thought that, not that I'm a swimmer, but if I went into a pool with Michael Phelps, just that flap thing that he did before every race would have been enough for me to just say, it's all yours, I'm leaving. He certainly was an impressive athlete, and he captured the attention of everybody during the Olympics. When he would be racing, everybody wanted to watch it, and I think there are very few athletes that sort of capture the attention as well as Michael Phelps did during his career. We talked a little bit earlier about one of the great rivalries in baseball history, the Yankees and Red Sox with the Bucky Dent game. But another great rivalry in New York, especially in the 1950s and 1940s, was the Brooklyn Dodgers and New York Yankees. And it began in 1941. The Yankees and Dodgers played each other. And in that game, the Yankees were ahead 2-1, but it looks like Brooklyn's going to win Game 4 until the sure-handed Mickey Owens drops a third strike late in the game that would have almost led certainly to a Brooklyn victory in a 2-2 series tie. By dropping that ball, allowed Tommy Hendricks of the Yankees to reach first base. The Yankees had a miracle rally to win that game, and they beat the demoralized Dodgers the next day to win the World Series. And that's basically where the term "wait till next year" starts in Brooklyn, which will finally come in 1955. We'll get there in a little bit. So we have the 5 tickets, as you can see, part of our formula, and we have some great images. But this is what I'd like to point out, because we like history in our pieces. So in 1941, when the Yankees defeat the Dodgers 4-1 to win the World Series, we have a program signed by the Dodgers and Yankees. The question I have for you out there is, who is the figure on the program? Can I give you a little bit of time? Well, I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Benjamin Franklin. That's a guess a lot of people have when they come to the show. And first of all, Franklin's associated with Philadelphia. These are 2 New York teams. And it's not Branch Rickey, some people have said. But the hint I will give you is there's a team in New York named after him, and it was a term used to define or describe a New Yorker in the 20s and 30s and 40s. It's very rarely used. Okay, I'll give you another few seconds. Okay, it's Father Knickerbocker. Yes, Father Knickerbocker, who the New York Knicks are named after, and kids today have no idea what a Knickerbocker is. So it's basically a mythological figure. I believe Washington Irving wrote it in one of his books. And what it was a term used to describe New York in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So if you were in New York and you were traveling to Philadelphia or Boston, a lot of times when you came into the room, a Knickerbocker entered. So the interesting part about that, in 1946, just 5 years after this program is shown, the NBA comes to existence. And what was it, the nickname they used for the New York franchise? The Knickerbockers. And it made complete sense. That was a term that was used back then. It's very rarely used today. I think it kind of went out of style in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. But I think it was a great nickname. However, today, if a New York franchise started, chances of being called the Knickerbockers would never have been picked or selected. So again, I love bringing history into our pieces, and I hope you enjoy this work as well. Well, as we just showed in our previous piece of Wait Till Next Year finally arrives in 1955. We had so much interesting information that we couldn't do it all in one display. We actually had to do it in 3 pieces, almost like a triptych. What you see here among our most important items, again, are the 7 tickets. It won 7 games. And finally, Johnny Padres wins Game 7, and Brooklyn is elated and goes crazy for their one and only championship. What we also bring to attention of people are, you need, besides tickets to go to a game, and again, as I've explained before, or always bring up, vintage tickets are very, very important in our pieces, and you don't get them anymore, especially for important events. Tickets, or you get no tickets all through the phone. So we're really thrilled that we have all 7 tickets here. The other thing is you need transportation. How are you going to go to a game? Walk, subway, or bus? As you see in the first panel over there, we have a really unique item showing the bus signage as you would take the B39, B40, and B41 bus. You would start off at Williamsburg Bridge, you would go to Ralph Avenue, and you'd get off at Flatbush Avenue, which is Ebbets Field stop. And we thought it was really cool inclusion in this particular display. We also have the Jackie Robinson autograph. You have to have Jackie Robinson, he was such a special player. We also celebrate the famous play when Yogi Berra tags out Jackie Robinson, or so he thought. The umpire ruled differently, and Yogi went to his grave thinking that Jackie was out, and Jackie went to the grave thinking he was safe. So, you know, the 2 great players with different opinions. The other thing I find interesting, of course, are press passes and working passes. And this actually belonged to Ned Fleischer, who was a well-noted boxing writer in New York in the 50s. Probably one of our other prized items is the Schaefer Beer team photo, which is a rare item that came out, the following year to celebrate that great team. and very rarely have I seen one, and then when I see them, they usually rip to shreds. It's made of a kind of a poor cardboard. We think we have probably the finest example of this particular mode of showing the great 55 Dodger championship team. Some of the other items that we have are all the autographs of all the players. So you'll see all the team signed by many of them, and then individually. We also have, of course, Vin Scully, the announcer, and even Tommy Lasorda was part of that team. Also, what we show is a rendition of a stadium that the Dodgers wanted to have to stay in Brooklyn. Of course, it never happened. But if you take a look at it, it's very modern. And remember, that's 1955. You almost feel that that stadium could be built today, and it would still look great. We have so many items to go over, but another item that we have is a program from the 55 World Series signed by Don Newcombe, one of the great pitchers in the Dodgers pitching staff. For anybody who wants to celebrate Brooklyn's one World Series championship, there's nothing you'll ever get that comes close to what we think is the epitome of a Brooklyn Dodger 1955 celebration display. As you know, we like to believe that our pieces are all monumental, certainly in scope. In this particular case, the next piece doing with the Notre Dame Heisman Trophy winners, it's not only monumental in scope, but in size. This is 4 feet by 8 feet, so this is truly a major work, but deservingly so. Notre Dame had 7 Heisman Trophy winners. And what we go all the way from Bertelli all the way to Tim Brown, or explore all of them. And what we'd love to have, the key factor or the key component, I believe, in these pieces are having the official Heisman ballots and who they were signed by and who was the second and third choices I found quite interesting. For example, in 1947, Johnny Lujack wins the Heisman Trophy. A gentleman named Pershing Rohrer from the Akron Messenger, an Ohio newspaper, got the vote. And it's kind of neat that small newspapers around the country had a say in the Heisman winner. His first choice was Lujack, who prevails and wins the Heisman. But his second choice is Doak Walker, great player from SMU. And third is Charles Bednarik from Pennsylvania, who I always remember as the guy who almost knocks out Frank Gifford in a football game. We also have a part of the bench of Notre Dame, and it's just really special in so many ways. Notre Dame is one of those great teams. Some people love them, some people don't like them, kind of like the Yankees of college football. And for anybody who's a Notre Dame fan and wants something very special, I think you're not going to find anything better than this. I would say, almost by definition, if any Notre Dame alumnus or Notre Dame fan acquires this, I would think that just having this makes you the #1 Notre Dame alumnus. During our show, we've done quite a bit with the New York Yankees, and well, they deserve it, having won 27 championships and having so many wonderful players. But the other team in New York, the New York Mets, have had a couple of really fantastic seasons. One is the '69 Mets, the legendary Mets of '69, who brought home the first world championship for New York Met fans. And then, of course, the '86 team. And what we do here is celebrate the '86 World Series champion. Again, we have all 7 tickets. We actually even have a part of a chair at Shea Stadium. Not only does it add great color to the piece, but of course, you can only imagine all the great events that somebody saw during sitting in that seat at Shea Stadium. What we also have is all the autographs of all the players here. I'm always surprised when they have these victories and these big pylons that no one ever gets hit. You almost think the losing team will at least have their entire roster back in spring training. I don't believe anybody was hurt in this particular melee, if you will, or in this particular pileup. But, you could see that it probably could have been uncomfortable for the ones in the bottom, but do they care? They just won the world championship. Of course, you have to mention the Buckner play with Mookie Wilson, which we make note of there. And again, this is one of the happiest times in Met history, and this is a very unique team in many ways. As you know, during our tour, we've explored the Yankees quite a bit, and we've also made a little bit, we've hit the Red Sox fans a little bit with the Bucky Dent game, but the Red Sox have a rich tradition, especially the last 15 to 20 years. They've been as good, if not better, than the Yankees in winning championships. But in 2012, we decided to celebrate their great ballpark, Fenway Park, which reached its centennial at that point. And we have tickets for various important games, as Yaz's 3,000th hit and other things such as that. We have part of the Green Munster, part of Fenway Park. We actually have an important base. I won't tell you how we got it, but it truly is a stolen base. We have a Ted Williams photo. We have a great young image of a young and determined Babe Ruth, and so many other pieces here. It's really hard to get 100 years into one particular display, but we think we did a great job and something special for anybody who's a Boston Red Sox fan. As you know, in the past, we've always enjoyed adding artwork to our shows, and one of the artists that we have, part of my parents' collection, is BEN GANZ. And Mr. GANZ did New York City scenes of churches, synagogues, and much of New York City. And for our particular case here, he has done a number of really interesting watercolors dealing with Yankee Stadium in the 1930s, and we thought they would make a fine addition for the show, and let's take a look at some of them. Here is, in 1933, his rendition of Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds, the two great stadiums that Ruth conquered both of them, and I thought that they would be great additions for the show. Here is Yankee Stadium that I kind of remember, the early Yankee Stadium that I went to in the late 60s, and what I remember were the pillars, and as you can see with the pillars, if you got that seat behind one, you spent the whole day doing this type of thing. Maybe it's great exercise, but it was a little bit frustrating at times. But I just thought it was great to get that view of what it would be like to watch the great Yankee teams in the 30s, 20s, and even 40s. I've always enjoyed history, and when I look at this particular watercolor of BEN GANZ of 1936, showing Yankee Stadium from Jerome Avenue, what I found fascinating was the subway train going by. As a kid, even in the late 60s, this was covered up by billboards. So just imagine when you were traveling on the train, you'd be able to see the Earl Combs, the Joe DiMaggios, the Babe Ruths. You know, I have no idea. I'm pretty certain that I would have been the kid who pulled the chain and stopped the train from going just so I could watch a few more minutes of these great views and these great teams. But anyway, this is something special. You don't often see a watercolor or any artwork celebrating Yankee Stadium in such an interesting fashion. During our video tour today, we've explored many of the great accomplishments of individual players. We've also celebrated some of the great teams in sports history, championship teams. And also special moments, certain games that will remain in baseball and sports history. But also, besides that, sometimes the most important game in a person's life is the first game they go with their father, the first game they go with their mother, the first time they go with their girlfriend or wife or the child. And on occasion, I've been known to surprise some of my clients, some good friends, with displays celebrating such moments. So, for example, a gentleman who is a friend of mine had mentioned that his first game was on August 24th, 1968, and unbeknownst to him, I spent 2 years putting together this piece that I'm about to show you, celebrating that moment. It was quite a chore, but I think we got it down. So what I found was the ticket from the game in August 24th, 1968. I found the scored program. Incidentally, the person who had it wouldn't sell it to me. I tried $100, $200, $300, $400, $500. Finally, he said, if you want it that badly, you have to do a piece for me. So that was quite a barter that I did, but at the end of the day, I think it was important to have for this piece. We have all the autographs of the Yankees who played in that game on 68 cards. This is my team, by the way. They weren't very good, but this is the first teams that I remember with the Jake Gibbs, the Horace Clarks, the Roy Whites, and Joe Pepitone. Then, by the way, so the Yankees were not a very good team that year. And they happened to be playing a great team that year, the soon-to-be world champion Detroit Tigers. We have the autograph of all the Tigers who played in that game. And this gentleman who was at this first ball game went to quite a game because Denny McLain was 31-6. And this is one of his 6 losses, was this game to Mel Stottlemyre, one of the great Yankee pitchers. And in fact, we have in addition to the ticket in the program, we also have vintage newspaper articles. And this one I found fascinating. The great Mickey Mantle, in his last season, he actually had a bunt single. I would have thought by that time it's either home run or bust, but it showed you he was a team player right to the end. Even the image here is showing him about to do that bunt single. Apparently the second baseman was playing well into right field. Mantle said, he's giving it to me, let me take advantage of it. And again, you know, it's something that I like to do for people, my clients and friends, is sometimes surprise them with something. They've been nice enough to be, you know, have acquired a number of pieces from me, and I felt this is something I could do for them. And this is a gift I think really registered with the gentleman, and it even has registered with people here who love that idea and concept. In fact, this is one of the most enjoyed pieces I have here because it tells you about a game that's not super significant in its importance other than it was a game that somebody spent his first time at the ballpark and his first time with his dad. Now here's another display I did for another one of my favorite clients and friends who happens to live in El Paso, Texas. This gentleman one time came into one of my shows, which was at Thomas Moser, and he not only acquired a number of pieces from me, but he also told me that he's from El Paso, Texas. And you know, I love my sports, but I not realize how important Texas Western had been in sports history at that time. And he reminded me that in 1966, Texas Western defeated Kentucky in the NCAA championship at the Cole Fieldhouse. And it was very important because Texas Western was an all-black basketball team. Kentucky was an all-white team led by Adolph Rupp. Pat Riley was on that team, by the way. And when they defeated the favored Kentucky Wildcats, not only did it open the doors for black athletes now in southern schools, the Georgias, the Arkansas, the Alabamas, the Mississippi States, which is important, but it also just opened up the doors for the general black population and minority population to go to these schools. So it was a very important basketball game. And he flew me all down to El Paso. By the way, it's a long trip. And I got to meet these players, Worsley and Neville Shedd and artists and these guys, and I got to talk to them about this incredible feat. And it's just amazing when you speak to people who lived through history. As I was leaving, gentlemen in El Paso reminded me that the two heroes of El Paso sports in the 1920s were, believe it or not, Andy and Sid Cohen. There was even a baseball stadium in El Paso named after them. So I worked on this piece. I think it took too long for my client, but I hope he enjoys it. It could be sent to him right after the show. But what you see here are a display that I put together. Andy and Sid Cohen led El Paso High School in basketball, football, and baseball to state championships. They also then got scholarships to the University of Alabama, where they led Alabama in basketball, football, and baseball. Then they get to the major leagues. Andy becomes a starting second baseman for the New York Baseball Giants, and actually has an incredible opening game in 1928 when he wins the game for the Giants and the fans put him over their shoulders, and Mayor Jimmy Walker was at the game. Then Sid Cohen becomes a pitcher in Washington Senators. Well, it's true, he gave up Ruth's last home run as a Yankee, but he also was the last one to strike out Babe Ruth as a Yankee. And after their careers were over, they come back to El Paso, and they become involved in the baseball teams. I think they were both at, by the way, Texas Western now becomes University of Texas El Paso, UTEP. So they become the baseball coach there, plus the local team, the Diablos, for a period of time. And that's why the matting in this case is orange. Those are the colors of UTEP. And again, we have scorecards from games. We have autographs. We have the pennant from Alabama. So we put in a lot of things to just show what their life was about and the importance and relevance to El Paso, Texas. Throughout the show, we've explored baseball. We've explored football. And now we're going to hit basketball. And basketball is really one of the most important parts of my life. My high school, Mount Vernon, has basically had about almost a dozen NBA players. I grew up and played a little bit with guys like Scooter McRae and his brother Rodney McRae. Scooter was actually in my graduating class. I wasn't good enough, of course, to make the team, but I was a scorekeeper for the undefeated Knights of 1977. And prior to that was Gus and his late brother Ray Williams, guys like Lowe's Moore and Earl Tatum, and then later Ben Gordon, of course. Scooter, my classmate, of course, was probably the #1 high school player in the country that year, went to Louisville, won a championship, had a brief NBA career. Unfortunately, he injured his knee in practice with Darryl Duncanstein, Darryl Griffith, in practice and never quite was a player after that. And Rodney, his younger brother, had a really nice career with the Houston Rockets, and is one of the players who wins not only a high school championship, a college championship at Louisville, but also won his last year with the Bulls a championship. My father goes to Boys High, and is a school that produced the great Connie Hawkins, Sayugo Green, Marvin Kessler, that's the head scratcher for you guys out there, Pearl Washington, Mel Davis, and people like that. So now we're going to do a piece on the basketball, now that you know how important it is in my life. In 1996, the NBA turns 50, and they celebrate that by pronouncing who are the top 50 NBA players of all time. And here we have a piece with all the autographs of the top 50. At that time, To show you how young a league it was, 50 years old, only one player had passed, and that was Pete Maravich, who died sadly at the age of 40 on the basketball court. But it's been 25 years since then, and quite a few have passed, including DeBusschere, Will Chamberlain, Dolph Schayes, I believe, George Mikan, and others. And so as time goes along, you know, we lose more and more of our great ball players. And this piece, I think, is special for anybody who loves the NBA and wants to have a special piece celebrating those 50 great players. Well, thank you again for joining me on this journey of my collection here. I'm always amazed that my idea that came about on a 4th-floor walk-up has now reached some of the finer galleries in New York, some of the finest stores in New York, and also museums throughout the country. And now we're in a special club here. Hopefully one day, you know, we could be in your particular club or your particular business. We've been in a law firm. I think we just add to the morale of your staff. You'll definitely have your clients have smiles on their face. I think it's just a fun show for you to have or explore with, and we're happy to work with you. Also, our pieces are available. A number of them have found homes around the country, and they'll be loved because I know the collectors who have acquired them are thrilled to have them and can't wait to get them back as they've been away from them for a little bit of time in the show. And again, if you ever want to commission us, we love commission work. We work we'll be happy to work on your favorite team, your favorite player, perhaps the first game you ever went to with your father or mom or best friend. Anyway, thanks again for coming on this journey, and I look forward to seeing you at our next show.